Kenya is a country in East Africa known for its large amount of wildlife, as well as its diverse culture. The country's name comes from one of its landmarks, Mount Kenya, which is the second highest peak in the country. Kenya's relatively small population and much of its land is uninhabited by humans. So here's some history and about the government in Kenya. So here's Kenya was first under a protectorate of the German Sultan in 1885, but was soon under British and East Africa Company's imperialism. This time was a relatively rough period for the natives who resisted British imperialism. Some clans or groups have a history very similar to that of the Native Americans, in which they are moved to native reserves or had railways built through their religious structures, etc. Kenya, after much strife and a failed revolutionary war, gained independence in 1963. Soon after, in 1967, they fought a war with Somalia, who attempted to take a section of Kenya to be added to their own country. However, the Somalians were defeated. For the first part of Kenya's democratic history, a single-party system kept the presidential elections rather one-sided, because it allowed individuals to lead for long periods of time. Around this time also, a new regime was instated which made people, instead of voting by a secret ballot, would stand behind the candidate of choice. This created a huge psychological advantage for a single-party system, and was later deemed unconstitutional. More recently, as in 1992 to present, elections have been deemed more fair by local communities. They use a secret ballot system, and with this election of the current President Kibaki, people feel that this is a revolutionary turn for Kenya's democracy. Here's a basic info card for some things about the Kenyan government. Kenya is currently a democracy with a parliamentary legislative body, which means basically it's formed of different multiple parties and then proportioned by the voting ratios. It's a federal system. Despite being divided into multiple regions, each region has less power than the overall government. Power struggles between ministers and the president still exist because the constitution is still developing. And Kenya's development as democracy is well seen in its current happenings with Kibaki as president. He recently formed a grand coalition between himself and the ministers of Kenya to better distribute and assign powers. Ministers are basically those who take care of individual roles within the government. So an example, tourism minister, agriculture, foreign affairs, etc. When compared to America, or analyzing this, Kenya is doing extremely well for itself in terms of stability in comparison to its surrounding countries. With recent fair elections and working constitution, organized democracy is taking place. Kenya is in very good shape. However, it is still in the developing stages, or fledgling, and when compared to American democracy, it doesn't hold up as strong. In the future, however, the parliamentary system might be more effective than our current legislative body, and may take over in efficiency. Alright, now moving on to economy. Kenya's economy is a market-based with a few state-owned infrastructure enterprises, and maintains a liberalized external fair trade system. The country is generally perceived as an Eastern and Central Africa's hub for financial, communications, and transportation services. Expansions in tourism, telecommunications, transport, construction, and recovery in agriculture are leading to huge growth in GDP. These improvements are supported by a large pool of English-speaking professionals. This being said, economy is based on rain agriculture, which has been a large problem for them. The risks include drought, which can directly lead to famine for the entire country. Because the economy heavily relies on agriculture, the government pays a lot of attention to it. Government involvement generally includes reform policies to help productivity of farming. In my opinion, this is a relatively necessary thing because without the support of the government, agriculture would be having huge problems in terms of pay and efficiency. Compared to the U.S., the level of involvement of government in the economy as a whole is relatively low. With the recent passing of the privatization bill in 2008 by Kibaki, there will be even less government involvement and more privately owned businesses. Kenya's GDP and GDP per capita is $17.43 billion and $450 per capita in American dollars. However, purchasing power taken into account, it's around 1,200 American dollars per capita. Compared to its surrounding countries, once again, Kenya is doing relatively well in terms of its economy, and it's at a pretty steady state of growth. Looking at these figures, however, in comparison to America's economy, this is extremely destitute. America's 14.25 trillion GDP and 46.5k GDP per capita completely surpasses Kenya. This relates to a much lower standard of living than what Americans are used to. Recent studies from the UN also say that the standard of living in relation to similar countries is dropping at a fast rate. Recently fell below Uganda in rankings of over 10 slots. They are now ranked 154 out of 175 countries. This is determined by factors such as literacy rates, life expectancy, and multiple other factors. Kenya is still developing as a country and has a huge problem with erratic growth. However, they are still heading in the right direction and things are improving for most Kenyans. Kenya has a unique health system which runs in a way that very similar to which a hierarchy would. There are many different levels of healthcare in the healthcare system, and the first level being local clinics, which are privately owned. However, the levels above this are all owned by the government, and they are bigger hospitals. Patients are referred to from these local clinics when they can't handle their job, and they're sent to bigger entities. So here's some health statistics. Life expectancy between 47 to 55 years of age. Infant mortality rate is huge because of Kenyan culture of female genitalia mutilation, and a huge problem for a health problem in Kenya is HIV. It's an enormous problem in Kenya. Safety. Kenya is a safe country in comparison to its surrounding countries. It has a trustworthy police system and a judicial system that does a good job of stopping crime. However, Al-Qaeda and many other terrorist groups have made multiple attacks in Kenya and have led to many deaths of non-citizens and citizens alike. The military in Kenya has a great standing among its people. It enjoys a relatively good reputation and is often employed for peacekeeping situations. There have been no wars recently in Kenya either, so it's a relatively good time for them. In current events, law enforcement and security forces have been acting out of authority and violating many human rights. This has led to numerous accounts of reform and promise for more reform in the future by Kibaki, the current president. Despite being relatively safe in terms of how it relates to other countries in the surrounding area, it is definitely not as safe as America in terms of terrorism. However, on a domestic level, some areas of America may be similar to Kenya. In general, though, America is much more safe than Kenya. Moving on to justice. The judicial branch in Kenya is divided into three types of courts. The first is the Court of Appeals, which is the lowest level, then the High Courts. Also, there are sub-courts that deal with affairs such as court-martialing and other issues. The system is known to be uncorrupt, and the court system looked upon favorably by citizens of Kenya. The system definitely is a revolutionary in comparison to its surrounding countries and is rather sophisticated. When compared to the American court system, it's still at a slightly lower level, but in essence is very similar, not including the Supreme Court, which does not apply in the Kenyan judicial system. Civil rights. There are numerous civil rights issues in Kenya that range over a huge spectrum. Under the law, disabled are the most stigmatized and under-supported group in all of Kenya. The disabled receive little or no help from Kenyan government and can't play a vital role in society. Communities also reject disabled individuals, and they have to live in extreme poverty with very little necessities. In America, we have many policies and a lot of support for our disabled population. Braille, ramps, etc. help our disabled in living a normal life. Women are also heavily attacked and treated badly in Kenyan culture. In Kenya, women are like that of second-class citizens. This stems from the patriarchal culture that has been there since the time of the tribes. Hence, there are many cases of domestic abuse, and it is almost treated like a normal occurrence. Kenya is doing its best to protect its citizens and create a free environment. However, it lacks both money and the power to and proper legislation to amend these problems. The health system is relatively unreached by many of its citizens, thus leaving many unattended to, which explains low life expectancy. Disabled and women are having a hard time in society right now, and there are numerous other civil rights problems. However, since the election of Kibaki, things have really improved. Recently, the UN has reported numerous bills that are being passed in Kenya by Kibaki related to domestic abuse. The UN has praised Kenya's attempts at fixing gender issues and says that conditions are improving.